Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We're about to start the meeting of the Zoning Board of Adjustment for July 26, 2017. Will everyone please rise for a salute to the flag? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Notice of the meeting has been satisfied in accordance with Chapter 231 PL 1975 by advertising in the Home News Tribune, notifying the Centennial Publishing Company and the Star Ledger, posting on the bulletin board, and filing with the Borough Clerk. Roll call.
Mr. Green?
Here.
Mr. Kaczynski?
Here.
Mr. Kreismer?
Here.
Mr. Henry?
Here.
Mr. Emma?
Here.
Mr. Esposito?
Here.
The first application on the agenda tonight will be Interstate Outdoor Advertising, 969 Route 9 / Old Cheesequake Road.
Mr. Chairman, just for the record, I've had an opportunity to review the affidavit of publication and proof of service, and the board does have jurisdiction for the application this evening, so we just need a motion to deem it complete.
So moved. Second.
Deem the application complete.
Chairman, my name is David Himmelman, and I represent Outdoor Advertising. I'm sorry, apologize. Again, my name is David Himmelman. Good evening. I represent Interstate Outdoor Advertising LP. Mr. Chairman, I've had a discussion with Mr. Sachs, your attorney. We had originally thought we might combine both applications for simplicity purposes, but understand Mr. Sachs has requested that we separate these out. There may be some overlap in the testimony, and you'll see that as you proceed, but we will proceed with each application separately. And if that's okay with you.
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay. As the board is aware, this is an application for preliminary and final minor site plan and conditional use variance approval. And for the record, this is block 29203, lot 3. I assume, Mr. Chairman, you're going to start with with what I'm referring to as the Phoenix truck site. Is that the first one you want to proceed with?
The other one.
Fine. Just wanted to clarify. So we are going to proceed with the property that's identified for the record as 413 Lot 4 on your, of course, your current tax map, and it's identified as 949 Highway Route 9, and we're going to refer to that generally as the doctor's office location.
Yes.
Okay, very good. As you know from the application and the materials we submitted, the applicant is seeking approval to erect a monopole advertising sign on the property in question. The proposed sign consists of LED technology on one face and a static display on the other face. The property is located in the B3 highway zone, and billboards are permitted use, as your planner indicated in his memorandum, with conditions in the B3 highway business zone. Since the applicant cannot satisfy all of those conditions, as your planner has reported, a conditional use variance D3 is required. In this particular instance for the doctor's office site, the applicant seeks several bulk variances, and I'm just going to briefly review them as we proceed. This is referring to your ordinance under section 2685. Under 8.2, minimum distance to another billboard, 1,000 feet is required. The applicant proposes 530 feet for the proposed sign to an existing billboard to the east, and 160 feet from the existing billboard across the highway from the proposed sign. Therefore, that condition needs to be satisfied. The next variance is section 2685 9A. 6, minimum distance to a residentially zoned property, 300 feet is required, and we're showing 109 feet as proposed. The next variance would be section 26859A. 10, that's the minimum setback requirement line from the structure. 30 feet is required and 0 is proposed. And then section 26859A9, minimum setback line from any property line, 30 feet required and 11.2 feet is proposed. And then finally, section 26859A1, minimum lot frontage, 200 feet is required and 110 feet is proposed. Mr. Chairman, we have several witnesses tonight on both applications, but in connection with the initial one, Tom Grabowski, our project engineer, was going to testify on the overall site plan. Jeffrey Gerbel, who's the president and chief operating officer of Interstate, who will be qualified as an expert on outdoor advertising, will testify on the site background for the application, site selection, status of DOT permits, signage detail, including benefits to the community. And finally, our planner, John McDonough, will testify on the variances sought and the justifications under the municipal land use law. So that's pretty much the lineup, and if the board or your professionals don't have any questions at this point, we can proceed with our first witness. Thank you. Tom?
Sir, please raise your right hand. I'll swear you in. Swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
All right, please state your name, spelling your last name, professional affiliation for the record.
My name is Thomas Grabowski, Grybowski.
Very good.
Your affiliation, sir?
I'm the president of Grabowski Group, who prepared the site plan.
And can you just give a brief background of your CV, and we can hopefully qualify you as an expert?
Sure.
You could grab that. Tom, might be easier.
It's right there.
Yes.
It's right now.
Hello.
Joe, help him with that.
You want me to, Joan, I can give him this one.
So we're putting new batteries.
Oh, okay.
There we go.
Okay. I am a licensed land surveyor and planner in New Jersey. I have a bachelor's degree in civil engineering. I've been preparing these plans and appearing for testimony since 1977 when I received my license. And I've, like I said, throughout the state of New Jersey, I've appeared before various zoning and planning boards.
Mr. Chairman, I move that he be accepted as, is he engineer or?
Well, I'm not a licensed engineer. Dan Caruso of my office is a licensed engineer. He actually prepared the plans, but most of the plans are really related to elevations and distances and properties, which are, you know, pretty much land surveying type issues, so.
And Mr. Grabowski, I assume those plans were prepared under your direction?
Yes.
Okay, that's fine. So you can make a motion to accept him.
As an engineer?
You can make a motion to accept him as a land surveyor.
Land surveyor, okay, that's what I do.
Whose plans were also prepared under his direction by a licensed professional engineer.
Okay, that's my motion.
Okay.
A second?
Second.
Proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Grabowski, if you could just briefly, I know you brought an exhibit with you tonight, is that correct?
Yes, I did.
Okay, and is that a enlarged version of what was submitted with the application?
Yes, it is.
Should we have that marked?
Let's mark it.
Okay, why don't you-
A1?
Turn that also, please.
Mr. Grabowski, just indicate what the title of that exhibit is.
And just also date it.
Okay, the title is Site Plan of Freestanding Billboard for Lot 4, Block 413.
Thank you.
We'll identify that as it A1 or, and just initial that and date it. So Tom, under your direction, you indicated that the plan in front of you that's been marked as A1 was prepared. So can you just take us through the plan, the property description, and the general zoning issues so we can sort of introduce the project? Thank you.
Sure. To prepare the plan, initially we went out and we established a property boundary. It has 20,223 square feet, or 0.46 acres. We researched the ordinances and the township checklists and prepared the plan accordingly. The applicant actually determined the sign location, the height, and the setbacks for this project. The subject property is located on the east side or northbound lane of New Jersey State Highway Route 9, north of Pillar Drive. The parcel is developed as a commercial office, and the proposed monopole is located within the lawn area in front of the building and adjacent to the adjacent to the existing parking area. Access to the site is through the driveway entrance, and the adjacent property to the north of the subject site is developed commercially, and the commercial and residential uses are to the south, commercial uses to the west, and residential uses to the east. The subject property is not within a flood hazard area per FEMA firm map for this area. The proposed sign is a V-shaped, two-sided outdoor advertising sign having a 20-foot spread in the rear of the separating the two faces. The southern sign face is digital, and the north face is a static sign. The static face includes 3 100-watt LED lamps. The sign size is 14 feet by 48 per side, which is 672 square feet per side, or 1,344 square feet total. The sign is supported by a approximately a 4-foot steel monopole, and the sign is 50 feet high from the grade at the base of the sign to the top of the sign. The front face of the sign is 16 feet off of the highway right-of-way, and the rear face of the sign is 110.6 feet from the rear property line. Again, we are in the B3 highway district where billboards are permitted as a conditional use, and we are asking for 6 variances.
Very good. Mr. Grabowski, you'd like to add anything else? Or you think you've covered everything?
No, it pretty much describes the property and the sign itself.
Very good. Mr. Chairman, I don't know if you have any direct questions for Mr. Grabowski or members of the board.
Anyone have any questions?
Okay.
Next witness.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Mr. Chairman. Oh, yeah, go ahead. Yep. Our next witness is Jeff Gerber. I guess we can have him sworn in.
Sir, please raise your right hand. I'll swear you in. Swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
All right, please state your name, spelling your last name, professional affiliation for the record.
It's Jeffrey Gerber, G-E-R-B-E-R. I am the Chief Operating Officer and President of Business Development for Interstate Outdoor Advertising.
Thank you.
Mr. Sachs, we are going to, in a few minutes, go over Mr. Gerber's professional background, and we'd like to consider the board having him as an expert in outdoor advertising, but I'll walk through that in a moment. Before we do that, though, Mr. Gerber, I just want to make sure you brought several exhibits with you this evening, right?
Yes.
Okay, so we can refer to them as we proceed with your testimony.
Correct.
Okay. If you could just go through your personal background, your education experience, your experience at Interstate, and your duties and responsibilities.
Okay, I'm a 1984 graduate of Rutgers College, 1987 graduate of Rutgers Law School. From 1987 until 1991, I was a Deputy Attorney General of New Jersey. I was assigned to the Department of Transportation, and in particular, I was counsel to the Department of Transportation's outdoor advertising section, which regulates outdoor advertising signs throughout the state of New Jersey. In that capacity, I promulgated regulations, outdoor advertising regulations for the department, interpreted them, and enforced them. In 1991, I left the Attorney General's office and joined the law firm of Bressler, Amory, and Ross in Morristown, New Jersey, first as an associate, later as a partner in 1996. I represented numerous outdoor advertising companies in New York, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania on all aspects of outdoor advertising, from leasing locations to obtaining approvals from the New Jersey Department of Transportation to obtaining land use approvals from local zoning and planning boards in New York, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania. In January of 2001, I left Bressler, Amory, and Ross and joined Interstate Outdoor Advertising as in my current position as Chief Operating Officer and President of Business Development. And for over the last 16 years, I've been involved in over 250 outdoor advertising sign projects in New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Illinois, Indiana, and Louisiana. I handle all aspects from site selection, siting, determining the sign height, to obtaining all governmental approvals, whether state, local, or county, to negotiating leases, to overseeing the construction and maintenance of the signs. I've been deemed an expert in the area of outdoor advertising before over 75 boards in New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Illinois, Indiana, and Louisiana.
Thank you, Mr. Gerber. Mr. Chairman, based on Mr. Gerber's discussion of his personal background and his responsibilities and duties with his current company, the applicant, and his statement that he's been admitted as an expert in outdoor advertising matters in many, many jurisdictions, we would request respectfully that Mr. Gerber be admitted as an expert on outdoor advertising matters.
Let me weigh in on this for a second. Mr. Gerber, what are you going to testify to?
Well, there's going to be discussion about why the sign is the height that it is. Not necessarily this location. There's not a variance being requested, but there still may be questions about that. There may be questions about impacts of how the sign is going to look once it's built. There may be questions about the operation of the digital signs. How does digital operate? Those kinds of issues. Why was this site selected? Those kinds of things.
All right, well, first of all, I'm assuming you have a planner who's going to testify as to the impacts
Correct.
Upon the surrounding community.
Correct.
I mean, I heard your title. You said you're the Chief Operating Officer of Interstate Outdoor Advertising. So I'm assuming you're going to be testifying as to why you picked this location.
That's correct.
Okay. I'm not sure that's within the province of expert testimony. I understand that there are areas that require expert testimony. I don't have my rules of evidence with me, but I do remember some of it. When it's something that's not within the purview of the average layperson to consider. So
Correct.
I don't have a problem with Mr. Gerber testifying as to, on behalf of his company, which is certainly in a self-serving capacity, as to why this site was chosen. Certainly you can testify and you can talk about line of sight, which I'm sure you're going to testify to. I'm not so sure it falls within the purview of expert testimony, though.
I think the issue is that certain opinions are going to be rendered by Mr. Gerber, so I think it goes to the level of credibility as to how the board views those. So I understand Mr. Sachs, your point about impacts would be more within the purview of our planner. But on site selection, some other items, I think it goes to the weight of his opinion. So I mean, we can certainly agree at this point that based upon his experience in the industry, and he works for the applicant, that he can testify on those issues, but I think the concern is that it goes to the weight of how the board views it. So
But that's up for the board to gauge.
I
determine his
understand. So
credibility. So if he wasn't here on behalf of the applicant, I think it would be a different story. But
Correct.
the fact that he's indicated that he is the COO of Interstate Outdoor Advertising, which is the applicant, that sort of changes this scenario. So, I mean, I certainly, Mr. Gerber, you can testify. Obviously, you've got a lot of experience. You're going to tell us why this site was located. You're going to probably tell us, and I've sat through a lot of these applications, so I know what you're going to say. You could tell us about, how long the view is and why it's important at this particular site. I'm not so sure it falls within the purview of it being expert testimony. That's all I'm suggesting.
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, obviously, Mr. Sachs, you've correctly pointed out that the board is going to consider the statements and opinions, and they'll weigh in on that appropriately based on his experience, so we can move on. Okay, thank you. Mr. Gerber, my understanding is that you've brought some exhibits, and we first want to get into the site location and area and discussion on the aerial photos that we've brought. So I don't know if you want to
Sure.
first
Just
have those
before-
marked, but before you, I know you wanted to make a statement.
No, quick before that, just on the background of our company, just to introduce who Interstate Outdoor Advertising is. We've been in business since 1984. We're based in Cherry Hill. We have offices in Hoboken and also Atlantic City. We're the largest New Jersey-based outdoor advertising company in the state. We have over 800 signs in the state of New Jersey. We also have signs, as I mentioned, in New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Illinois, Indiana, and until recently we sold the signs we had in Louisiana. So I just want to provide that site background, and then we can go to the exhibits that we have.
Fine.
Okay.
Probably refer to all that,
We're handing out booklets to the board members and professionals that really are the same as exhibits on the board, but they'll be easier for everyone to follow along.
And if we could just identify those for the record and maybe initial those. Now, those are included in the handouts,
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, so
Well,
what you're seeing up there is in your handout materials. But if you, Jeff, if you can identify those for the record.
Yeah, what the first exhibit, which I'll mark as A2, has two documents on it. One is just a map showing the general area of the property. The second one on A2, the bottom one, is an aerial photo showing the sign along the east side of 9 in what would be the northbound lane side of Route 9. And then there's another exhibit which I'll mark as A3, which is a rendering of the proposed sign with the top sign showing what we call a right-hand read or the south face directed to northbound traffic on Route 9. And then the second rendering at the bottom of this exhibit is what we call a cross read, and it's a north face directed to southbound traffic on Route 9.
Okay, very good. And if you could just go through a little bit about the description of the property in question and the site characteristics.
You know, as a general rule, when we look to develop a property for outdoor advertising purposes, the first thing we look at is a major transportation corridor, which Route 9 in this area is. It's just south of the entrance to the Garden State Parkway, heavily trafficked area. It's also in a commercial zone. We only look to put signs in commercial or industrial zones, which this is. And we also look to put signs only in areas that will not impact residential areas. We don't want our signs shining into anyone's bedroom or their living room. And so this location fit, from our perspective, all of those concerns and addressed those concerns. The sign is at a 50-foot height for two reasons. And by the way, how we pick height, I probably should explain that to the board. We actually have a telescoping pole with a flag on it. and we take the pole, we put it at the proposed location of the sign, and put the pole up to the bottom, to what would be the bottom of the sign, to make sure that there's no signage along the side of the road or other impacts that would block the sign, because the sign has to be completely unblocked. You can't have 20% of the sign blocked or 10% of the sign blocked, because advertisers design their copy to fit that entire sign. It's a 14 by 48 advertising copy. That's a standard size in the industry. It's nationwide standard. So you have to have an unblocked display face. And so what we did at this location, we do all locations, is we put this pole up with a flag on it, and we ride up and down the highway, in this case up and down Route 9, and it can be an obstruction on one side of the sign that requires the entire sign to be up. You want the sign, both faces, to be at the same elevation for aesthetic purposes. In this case, there were two issues. The first issue would be for the cross read, which is this canopy and Sunoco sign to the north. Had some impact on this, and also we are flagging the sign back a little bit over the building that's on the property. So those two constraints require the sign to be at that 50-foot height. I think, yeah, so that's why the sign is at the height that it is. The face that's directed to northbound traffic or the southern face is the digital face. The other side is static. And I don't know if the board's familiar with the digital sign operation, but I can provide some testimony regarding how that works. The digital sign, in fact, the digital sign and the static is regulated first by the New Jersey Department of Transportation. We applied for and received an approval and a permit from the New Jersey Department of Transportation to have static on the northern face and digital on the southern face. DOT, when they do their review, if they have any concerns regarding traffic safety, they will deny the application. They had no concerns with traffic safety in connection with this application by virtue of its approval. And DOT also has specific regulations that regulate the operation of the digital sign. It has to remain, the copy from the digital has to remain static for 8 seconds. It must change in less than a second, and in fact, this sign changes instantaneously. It can have no motion. It has to be a static copy. This sign will have no motion, has static copy. There is also brightness controls, not necessarily regulated by the state of New Jersey, but has been regulated by the industry, and that is the sign can't be brighter than 0.3-foot candles measured at a distance of 250 feet. And that's 0.3-foot candles above ambient light. What that means is that during the day, the sign is brighter. If it's a cloudy day or in the evening, the sign powers down, so that the sign never is overly bright. And that 0.3-foot candle standard has been adopted by a number of municipalities, been adopted by what was once called the New Jersey Meadowlands Commission, now is New Jersey Sports Authority, for all their coverage, and adopted by other governmental entities as well. This sign will meet all of those requirements in terms of brightness, operation. If there is anything that malfunctions on the operation of the digital sign, it has an automatic shutoff on it. And the sign is monitored, its operation is monitored 2 ways. It's monitored by the digital provider, a company called Watchfire, that monitors the sign. And we also monitor it at our home office in Cherry Hill. We can, in 1 second, we can put that sign on our computer and see how it's operating. And if anything malfunctions, we immediately get notification and can immediately turn it off.
Now you mentioned in terms of site selection that one of the criteria you look at, Mr. Gerber, does not impact the residential area. Could you maybe just elaborate a little bit on that issue?
Yeah, sure.
For us?
There is a residential neighborhood behind the sign. And first you have the sign which is in front of the building, so a good portion of the back of the pole supporting the sign is blocked by the building. But behind the building is a vegetative area. There's some deciduous trees, but there are also some evergreen trees that will block the back of this sign to anyone that's along, because Eugene Boulevard is road back here. There'll be no, you will not be able to see, certainly, first of all, let me be really clear, no one along the back of these streets are going to be able to see any advertising copy on this sign at all. There is absolutely no visibility at all to any advertising. This sign has been designed and is proposed to be directed to the motorists that go up and down Route 9. No one's going to come out of their home and see any advertising copy on this sign. Worst case is that they may see a portion of the back of the sign, a portion of it, and it be obstructed in the dead of winter when there's no leaves on the trees, and that would also be very limited. So no impact. No one's going to see, an advertisement in their bedroom or in their living room or have their house illuminated because of this sign, given its orientation to Route 9.
Now, in terms of, you did mention the sign height, and you indicated that was 50 feet, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And if you could just, sort of as a outgrowth of your statements regarding the impact of the residential, can you just describe a little bit how that height was determined and the basis for that?
That's what I said before. We put a pole up and we rode up and down Route 9. We don't want to build the sign any higher than we have to for an obstructed ability. It's easier, the lower we can build it, it's easier to be read. It's a lot less expensive. It's less pipe. It's less foundation. There's no benefit to putting the sign any higher up in the air than we absolutely have to. That's why we use the pole device. And when we ride this back and forth, we're riding, we're looking to see, where, and we put the pole to the bottom, what would be the bottom of the sign. Because once we clear that, there's no other issue. And here, it was really this Sunoco sign down to the north that had a little bit of impact to the sign that we has to get just above that so it wouldn't block the visibility of what would be the static face directed to southbound traffic on Route 9. And also to really get it comfortably over the building to the rear.
Now, you mentioned a little bit about the content of the advertising. Could you get into
yeah,
that a little bit, please?
Yeah. One of the things that we do, and it's for all our applications before all the zoning boards that we apply to, we recognize that the town can't regulate the advertising. It raises First Amendment issues, but we can voluntarily offer to be included in our approval, if we get an approval, that we would not put any copy up on the board that would be gentlemen's clubs, go-go bars, any kind of pornographic copy. I mean, our advertisers is what I call G-rated advertisers. They're insurance companies, they're car companies, they're airlines, they're jewelers. It's those kinds of advertisers, hospitals, who are our clients. And so we have no issue with there being a condition that we're asking to be put in so there would be no gentleman's club or any kind of copy that would offend anyone in the community. And one thing also I wanted to mention, I forgot to mention before, about the digital sign. The digital sign is really, the digital face is really a great tool that can be used by the municipality. It can be used by the municipality to be tied into its emergency management notification system. With our cell phone, we can override the advertising copy and put up an emergency message. If there's an Amber Alert, if there's a weather alert, if there's a traffic accident up ahead, or a traffic condition, we can literally in 10 seconds put that notification up on our sign. And we've done that with a number of municipalities. We work out the protocols with the municipality. We set up templates of the type of copy that they would want. And all we have to do is be notified, and we have somebody monitoring this 24 hours a day, so those messages can be put up on there. And I can tell you that our company in Illinois, in Chicago, we won the largest public procurement in the country for 60 digital signs on all along the roadways going into Chicago on Chicago-owned property that's tied into their emergency management system, so that they can override all 60 digital faces and notify the public of a traffic alert or a weather alert and those kinds of things. And it's the first of its kind in the country. We are 3/4 of the way of having it being built out. We have about 45 of the faces built. But it's been a very successful project. Also, and the other benefit, I forgot to mention this too, is that the municipality can use, we never, unfortunately, we never sell all of the spots on that sign. There's 8-second spots that, like a 64-second minute, if you will. We never sell all 8-second spots. And so there's always vacancy, and that's always can be used by the town to promote. Firehouse has a fundraiser, the police station has a fundraiser. We did one in another municipality, opened up a brand new pool, and they wanted to let the community know they have a pool and they want people to use it. They sent us their copy, it's up on the sign, it's running on rotation once every 64 seconds. And that's at no cost. It costs nothing. Our art department can design the copy, and it costs nothing to put it up. It's really a great tool for the municipality if they choose to want to use it.
So, Mr. Chairman, both on, I guess, emergency matters as well as community issues, the applicant will be willing to work with the municipality on both those items, which we see as a great benefit to Saraville. Mr. Gerber, did you cover everything you wanted to cover on this application, or is there anything you'd like to add?
I had to say everything I wanted to say about it. If anyone has any questions, I'm more than willing to address them.
I do too. On page 5, there's a picture of your sign,
This picture right here?
this one here.
Oh, okay.
Page 5? Okay. That would be the northbound view.
Got it. Yes,
Right.
sir.
I see your sign, and I also see a telephone pole. Is that pole going to be just the way it is if that sign is erected?
We're not going to move the telephone pole. That is correct.
So the sign will be in front of your sign?
The pole will be in front of the sign. That's correct.
Okay. My other question is, you mentioned earlier about it's possible that when winter time comes, that the trees, when the leaves come down, that there could be some view of your sign on Eugene Boulevard. Now, hypothetically speaking, if the trees were removed for whatever reason, you would get more signage on Eugene Boulevard. Am I correct in that statement?
That's correct. You would, if the trees were removed, they're pretty large trees, and they provide a buffer. I don't know if why anyone would want to remove them, but there would be some visibility. Again, remember the building is in front of the pole of the sign. But if all the trees were removed, you would see a small portion of the pole and the back of the sign. You would not see any advertising copy of that sign on that street.
But you would get lightage on Eugene Boulevard to the residents that live in that area, correct?
That's not correct.
Okay.
The digital sign, first of all, directs its light in a very straight. If you look at if you ever ride on the highway and ride up along a digital sign, as soon as you get to an angle on it, it goes black because the diodes direct the light in a very straight direction. So with respect to the digital sign, no impact. With respect to the other sign, which would be the northern face directed to southbound traffic, you have 3 100-watt LED lights illuminating that sign. Those units are specifically designed to only illuminate the sign copy, the sign face. You can't have any spillage going out onto the roadway. By the way, that's a violation of NJDOT regulations, and we would have our permit pulled if it did that. And this sign is angled away from this development, from these homes. You're not going to see. It's certainly not going to illuminate Eugene Boulevard or Eugene Avenue. That's not going to happen. You're going to have illumination of a face. May you look up, may you see some light, a little bit of light in the sky. You might see, but it's not going to illuminate the neighborhood in any way. No one's going No one's going to say my street's lit up because of this sign or my backyard's lit up because of this billboard. Because everything is directed towards Route 9, not to what's behind it.
Mr. Chairman, I'm looking at your renditions that you have that it shows what the sign would look like on northbound, southbound side. Can you tell me how high the telephone pole is in front of that sign?
I would be guessing about how high it is. I don't know for sure. I don't know.
Because I was looking at your plans here, and it says the highest wire is 38 feet. And it looks like this telephone pole is taller than your sign.
Well,
And this is a 50-foot sign, and the telephone pole, I'm gonna say, is 40 feet.
I can tell you that when we do these renderings, things that are closer to the camera look way higher than they are. This sign, this height was determined actually by the pole. In other words, we took a photo where the pole is, and that's how we got the top of the pole, or the bottom of the pole would be where that bottom of that advertising copy is, and then we just added 14 feet onto it.
But I'm looking at the, your plan here, the engineering plan, it looks like the pole is almost in front of your sign, according to this. It's 15 feet off
But
the thing there, and
it's set back, and it's also the topography. You're looking down. You're not looking at it level. I think that has an impact as well because you're kind of coming up. I don't think that Route 9 is flat in this area, so I think that impacts it as well. These renderings, we try to make them as accurate as we possibly can, and we do show the sign. If you look at the cross read, we do show the sign well over the roof of the building that's behind it.
but if you look at the telephone pole there, the telephone pole again is higher than your sign.
Well, yeah, but
And it's right next to your sign. It looks like according to your plans. So it seems as if that rendering might be a lot lower than what it would look like in reality, to me, according to these plans.
If you were to take this sign and work your way from the top down, top of the sign is approximately 50 feet.
Right.
We're applying. You've got a 14-foot advertising facing. You have a 3-foot apron. Is 17 feet. So you're at 33 feet, and then you have this building with it's easily around 25 to 30 feet in height, and you still show it being above that. Yet I see what you're saying with the telephone.
The wire's
line.
at 38 feet, and it's
look
above your sign.
Yeah, right. But look at the building. I mean, my point is that the perspective of when you take these photos, certain things just don't follow a logical sense. And this is a great example of it when you compare it with that building. How do you explain that the building being at the height that it is?
I'm not
It
an
shows well
engineer,
above the
but
building.
Jay, could you maybe give us some insight? It just looks like it's a lot lower than it will be in reality, to me.
I think the issue might be also, it could be the digital perception of the photo and the fact that it's two-dimensional versus three.
That's that. Yeah, I mean, because look, we obviously
Exactly.
If we're well above this photo shows it being well above the roof line of that building, the
Right.
pitch of that roof. So that's about 30 feet looks. These renderings are, I believe, very close to how we've done these hundreds of times. I think we're quite good at it. You do get some of these strange because you are going from a three-dimensional world to a two-dimensional world. But we know the building is there. We know the thing is going to be over the roof. And this photo shows it being well above the roof.
Yeah, but the telephone pole is right in front of the sign according to your plans, and I would think it would still show your sign higher than the telephone pole. I don't know. Coming from that angle, you're looking at it basically on a flat plane, whereas the pole's here and your sign's here. It should be just like the opposite.
I would suggest
Completely wrong, but
No, I would suggest that if we had taken a picture, I tried to do the rendering from directly in front of the sign to the pole, you probably get the perspective that you're looking for. But because we took a cross read here to show this angle of it, you don't. But
Okay.
again, that's the best I can explain it to you.
all right, thank you. I don't know, Jay, did you want to have any
Well,
insight?
I
don't know.
can't comment on the digital photos. I can tell you, looking at the survey that was provided, I think you're accurate, that it says that the top wire on the one pole is 39 feet, top wire on the second pole is 38 feet, and it also indicates the top of the building is 22 foot high. So there are dimensions on the plan that show the wire height and the building height. But as far as how it shows up on that digital rendering, I see what your concern is. It appears that the wires are higher than the sign, but based on the plan view, that's not the case.
Thank you.
And Mr. Chairman, a question. It sounds like the digital sign, you don't have any sideways spillage or whatever the term would be, because of how you explained it. Why is only one digital and the other one not?
Oh, well, there's a separate application here, but our sales department, marketing department, felt that for the northbound traffic on 9 heading to the Parkway, that was the appropriate location for the digital, because the digital effectively is a multiple face sign as opposed to static being a single. So there needs to be more demand to justify that, and because of the way this is headed towards the Parkway, that it made sense to have that sign be digital.
Would you agree that if that second sign facing southbound was digital, there'd be less chance of the neighbors seeing light or a glow or anything?
I think that with respect to the to this face here, this is directed towards 9, but the LEDs that we have, there's these 100-watt LED signs. It's new technology that we use. There is very limited spillage. We're not allowed to have it per NJDOT regulations, and I think I said that with respect to this face, possibly in the evening you might see some little bit of glow off the sign, but not anything of any significant amount, in my opinion.
Any other questions?
Just a quick one. I know we've been through this before in terms of the control of the image on the digital sign.
Yes, sir.
I know, it's monitored, and if there are malfunctions, you're going to be aware of it quickly. What if somebody hacks into the system, which people hack into everything these days?
Yeah, I mean, we have a lot of protocols to protect it. We have an IT company that protects it. Our company, Watchfire, our digital provider, has protection. So there's a number of layers. We've been doing this for a number of years now. We've never had that issue.
Okay, let me phrase it. If you provide access to the sign to a local organization, the fire, police, whatever, emergency services, does that create an additional risk? Because
we don't provide access. How it works is we work out protocols where they notify us that they need this message, this template. Let's say it's a weather template.
Okay, but they don't make
No, they notify our person who has 24-hour notice on it, and we do it. They don't have the ability to unilaterally change the copy on the sign.
Jay, if I could you explain what I was trying to explain? Were you saying I was wrong in my interpretation is?
No, I was agreeing with you based upon the elevations. But the sign, based on the plan view, is 50 foot high. The top of the wire is 39 foot. So the top of the proposed sign is going to be above the wire, whereas in a rendering, it appears that the wire is above the sign.
Thank you.
I think the issue is it's optical. I don't think it totally projects or portrays what the survey has.
Yeah, I honestly, I really believe it certainly shows a realistic height compared to the building. Why and the sign looks level on this photograph. It's not like it's been angled in some way. This happens to be just how these two-dimensional photos look. I don't know how else to represent it other than that way.
Any other questions?
Thank you,
Wanna
Mr.
proceed
Chairman.
to your next witness?
Thank you very much, John. Mr. Chairman, our next witness is our planner, John McDonough. We'll have to have him sworn in and obviously qualified. Just a second. You might want to hang loose.
McDonough, please raise your right hand. I'll swear you in. Swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, I do.
All right, please state your name, spelling your last name, professional affiliation for the record.
Sure. Hello, everyone. My name is John McDonough. That's spelled MC, capital DONOUGH. I am the project planner.
And if you could just give us a brief of your background and licensure, please, John?
Sure. Again, licensed professional planner here in the state of New Jersey. I testify on a nightly basis in front of boards such as this. I've testified in just about every town that surrounds your community, the Brunswicks, Old Bridge, Metuchen, Edison, Amboys. I can keep going, Mr. Chairman, if you want, but this is what I do.
Make a motion, we accept his credentials.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. McDonough, as the project's planner, if you could give us an overview of the project, the zoning issues, and the justification for all the relief and variances sought, please.
Sure. This is one of those applications that starts with a look at what's on the ground now. We know that in terms of the positive criteria, site suitability is key for the grant of a variance. We're not dealing with a D1 variance here, a use that's not permitted in the zone. We're dealing with a D3 variance, which means the use is permitted. So we're not looking at the use per se. We're looking at the appropriateness of the site for this particular use, notwithstanding the deviations that have just been identified. And again, council has put them in. Your planner has put them in his report. I agree with those 6 deviations, and we'll hit them. But, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to give the board some visuals first to establish the conclusions that I'm about to make.
A3?
A3.
Just watch those staples, guys.
And you want to identify those, Ms. McDonough, also, and we should have them
Sure.
initialed. And
Again, A3 for the record, bearing today's date, 7/25.
actually, it's A4. I'm sorry, it's A4. Thank you, Jeff.
$725 or $726?
26.
26. I'm a day older.
So, for the record, A4 is going to be a 4-part exhibit. It's going to be file size 11 by 17, similar to the exhibit that you just got. It is going to start off again with another aerial photograph on the first page, outlining the subject property in yellow, with a little star that you can see where the billboard is going to be located, where it is proposed. Second page are a set of ground photographs that were actually taken of fairly recent vintage. You can see that these are taken just when the leaves are starting to change. They were taken in the late spring, maybe a month ago, maybe 2 months ago. Third page will be a set of photographs that show the surrounding land use context. And then finally, the fourth page we'll get into that actually talk about some of the benefits of this real-time messaging technology, this new technology that can provide those instant alerts which provide some immediate public benefits. So starting with the first page, we are looking at the subject site outlined in yellow. It is developed with a doctor's office. You see the building on the left side. You see the parking lot on the right side. The area where the star is located is actually a landscape area. It might look like a parking lot in this particular photograph, but it is actually a landscape area. So absolutely no loss of parking spaces, no interference with the operation of the site as you see it. Also, we're looking at a property that has a nice rectangular shape, and another element that adds to the particular suitability of this site is that nice green edge that you see along the perimeter. That green edge not only continues at the back of the property, but along the adjacent properties as well. Flipping over to the second page, we're looking at 2 views, view number 1 and view number 2, which is of the on-site doctor's office. The key point here from a particular suitability standpoint, excuse me, is that the site fits very nicely on the site. And then the third set of photographs, number 3 and number 4, shows another element of particular suitability and how the site is next to a highway in a business zone. Third page takes us to a look at the surrounding buffering. The key points here are that we do have a nice mass of buffering behind the subject site. All 4 views show how nicely that buffering is, both evergreens and deciduous trees. very mature, tall in height, 60 feet in height, substantially higher than the billboard that's being proposed. And then finally, the fourth page takes us to some of the benefits of this real-time messaging. I think we can all relate to a lot of the things that we see in this particular photograph. Frame number 9 shows a FEMA disaster alert, which could have taken during Sandy. Complete devastation on the ground, and yet the 1-800 FEMA number on the billboard that you see. Number 10 is another example of real-time messaging that relates to traffic alerts. In this particular photograph, a bridge that had collapsed, giving advance notice to motorists. And again, this in Minneapolis saved many lives. Number 11 is something I think we can all relate to, Amber Alerts. Again, if anyone in this room had a loved one who went missing, I think we would want to see that face on as many billboards as possible. So that's another inherent public benefit. And then finally, number 12, the advantage or the public benefit of real-time messaging in terms of fugitive alerts. So with that foundation, we tie back to the conditional D3 relief that the applicant needs. We'll take them one by one, but first, in terms of blanket justifications on the positive side, the general welfare is served because the site is particularly suitable for the use by virtue of its context. This is along a commercial highway, as you see in the photographs. The target market here is the motoring public. This is targeted at drivers, and you can see the site is nicely on the inside, or actually on the outside, of a large sweeping curve along Route 9, right in the view of the driver there, not going to be distracting. Again, there's a lot of studies that show that these signs are not distracting to drivers. Right where someone can see the sign, take a glance, and then focus back on the road. Also, by virtue of the condition of the property, this is going to be a very easy retrofit of the property as it presently exists. We're not looking at any tree clearing here. That is often a knock of billboards, is that there's some environmental considerations. None here. This is a site that will accept the use as is, no wholesale clearing or earthwork required. And of course, NJDOT has determined that this is a, quote, permitted location under its rules. NJAC 16:41, subsection C. Additionally, the general welfare is served by the following public benefits. The use is an instrument of business. This is something that is used by the companies that we all work for, work with, or invest in. It is the oldest form of mass medium that there is. It is something that works. That's why companies use it. The use is also an instrument of community institutions. We see hospitals being advertised on billboards. We see county colleges and the like on billboards as well. The use is also an instrument of constitutional free speech, which has been vetted through the United States Supreme Court, a fundamental constitutional right, and billboards serve that public benefit as well. Additionally, I just talked about the benefit of real-time messaging, that added component of a digital sign. It becomes an instrument of police and emergency services with Amber Alerts, fugitive alerts, weather alerts, and disaster alerts. There's also the real-time update of sports scores, entertainment, and those type of things. I've actually had someone in the public once say, we don't need billboards because we now have everything on our phones. We can just get that same information on our phones. Well, the truth is, this is a use that caters to drivers. We're not supposed to be looking at our phones. Billboards provide that information while we're driving. Additionally, the public benefit of local events. This can be channelized, as you've heard, through our operator to provide slots for announcement of local events, police, fire, community events, parades, and those type of things as well. Additionally, we look at the advancement of the municipal land use law as a purpose or a promotion of the special reasons and positive criteria. We see a nexus with the advancement of several purposes here, including purpose A, the promotion of the general welfare for all the reasons stated above. We do have a set of outdoor advertising rules whereby our state has made policy that actually finds that billboards are necessary for economic development. They do serve a public benefit in that regard, and that is stated public policy in our outdoor advertising rules. They do belong in certain locations. The most appropriate locations are along a highway in a non-residential zone, which is exactly where this particular location is. Additionally, the advancement of purpose G, the planning goal to provide for a variety of commercial uses in appropriate locations. Adjacent to a highway is a perfectly appropriate location. Our land use patterns follow our transportation patterns. We certainly look at the impact on our sensitive neighbors over on the adjacent side street on Eugene Boulevard. When one goes down Eugene Boulevard, you don't even realize that Route 9 is right there. It's been very well planned. We think there's been a nice separation established. Whoever planned it out did a very good job. And when you're over on Eugene Boulevard, it's a different world than when you're out there on Route 9. So to the extent that the ambient conditions have no effect on Eugene Boulevard, this sign will have no effect on Eugene Boulevard. Additionally, the advancement of purpose M, which is the planning goal to provide for efficient use of land. As I said, this is not wholesale new construction. This is just sticking a stick, if you will, on the property. Again, no substantial clearing, no substantial earthwork or the like. Lastly, in terms of the positive criteria, we look at the advancement and goals of your own master plan here locally. You have your 2013 master plan, which does have an economic development aspect to it and also looks for stable ratables and viable highway commercial uses. This is a highway commercial zone. This is a highway commercial use, so the two marry very well together. So with that, we see the advancement of the goals and purposes of the Sayreville master plan as well. All of those are what I would qualify as blanket justifications on the positive side. With respect to the negative side, there are some blanket justifications as well. The big three that we typically think about with billboards in terms of community impact are, number one, visual impact. I think the board had some good questions. What will we see if those trees come down? The truth is, those are mature trees. There's a lot of them. They have good diversity. They look perfectly healthy. And again, the applicant has complete control of the trees on its property, which is the immediate buffer that separates the subject sign from the adjacent resident. So from a visual standpoint, the impact will certainly not be substantial. Likewise, functionality. This is as benign a land use as there is. There's no activity, no noise generation, no traffic generation. And as you've heard, we often hear about glare or illumination associated with billboards. We have a very narrow cone of illumination. These digital signs actually have louvers above them, almost like a traffic signal to further channelize that illumination away from the residential properties. And lastly, as I said, safety-wise, there's always a concern that somehow these signs provide or create distraction. There are a lot of studies out there that show there are no driver distractions or correlation between accidents and between the location of billboards. Lastly, with respect to the negative criteria, the relief can be granted without substantial impairment to the zone plan. As I've said, this development is going to promote the economic development aspect of the master plan. It provides a strong commercial base. It protects or provides neighborhood preservation with excellent buffering and orientation away from the neighbors. Only the back of the sign is pointed towards the neighbors. That's separated by distance, that's separated by structures, and that's separated by foliage as well. If the board wants to impose a condition or feels a condition is appropriate, additional landscaping, supplemental landscaping is something I think the applicant would be amenable to. I know your planner is a landscape architect. I'm a landscape architect. I'm sure we'd be happy to infill some spots if necessary for buffering impact. Taking that together, certainly the weight overall is on the positive side. No substantial detriment on the negative side. Looking very quickly at the individual justifications, relief number one is for lot frontage. 110 feet is what we have across the front of the property. 200 feet is what's required. I think it's safe to say at this point that notwithstanding the frontage or the lack of frontage, this location easily accommodates the sign without causing any interference. It's not going to create a perception of being overcrowded. We've got a nice elongated site next door and a nice elongated site on the other side as well. So we think that the location by those flanking properties or adjacent properties mitigates the impact of having lack of frontage. Additionally, we look at the distance to another billboard. You heard that to the west, there's a sign 160 feet away, whereas 1,000 feet would be required. And to the east, there is another sign that's 530 feet away, whereas 1,000 feet would be required. What I like about this location is that it's located on a curve, so the impact of the nearer signs is not as extreme. If we were linear, we'd see a row of sign after sign after sign. As we drive down the road, because of that curve, the signs tend to pull away from the line of sight, and the visual impact is lessened in that regard. So I think the horizontal geometry provides a mitigating factor that would justify that separation standard and meet the planning intent of not having excessive visual clutter of signage. The distance to residential is 109 feet, whereas 300 feet would be required. I think the justifications are proven by the evidence we've provided that the planning intent to provide separation is met here. I don't think there's a location along this corridor, you can see how shallow these lots are, where that billboard would work. But yet, the physical attributes are there. Where we lack the horizontal separation, we do have the vertical separation by virtue of those 60-foot high trees that are separating the subject property. Lastly, the requirement that the sign be 30 feet from the side yard, whereas 11.2 feet is provided, and the setback from the nearest structure is required to be 30 feet, whereas 0 feet is provided, all relate to the physical condition of the property itself in a location that certainly causes no impediment to the operation of the property. The setbacks only relate to a structure that is overhead. We don't perceive it like we would if it were lower or on the ground. And in that regard, I think effective balancing has been made as well, where the negative impact is mitigated by the height of that sign. Bearing in mind, we're not looking for any height relief here. It's just related to the location and the separation. And from a planning standpoint, I believe the tests are met. I think the board knows very well it's the Coventry Square test that applies, not the Medici test that you often deal with when you're looking at use variances. This is a lesser test. It's not a focus so much on the use, but on the site and whether the site remains appropriate, notwithstanding those deviations. For all the reasons I've given, it's my conclusion that based on the testimony you've been given, the site does remain appropriate for a billboard at this location, and all of those benefits that I've given you clearly outweigh any detriments.
Mr. McDonough, thank you. Would you like to add anything, or do you think you've covered all your items?
I ran through my notes. Thank
okay,
you.
Great. Thank you. Mr. Chairman, we don't have any further direct testimony from Mr. McDonough, but obviously we'd welcome the board's questions or your professionals.
Any member of the board have questions?
I have a question. As you were giving your testimony, I was actually cruising down Eugene. Google Maps is a pretty cool tool. And I know you're saying that the height is not going to be a big deal, but I mean, as I'm going through the street, I can see the poles on Route 9 over the houses or between the houses because they're all ranch-type homes. So I don't know if you're saying that there isn't going to be a visibility issue or they're not going to see the sign. I don't think that's exactly true. Just from what I'm, just cruising down Eugene.
It's a good question, and the test is not whether or not the sign is invisible. From a planning standpoint, there is certainly a strong element of obscurity. There are structures that will mitigate or lessen the exposure of that sign. This is not something that is going to be head-on full view. There are interceptors in between. To the extent that the sign is visible, that we can see light poles along the highway there, and we would see the back of this sign. Again, the visual impact overall is not going to be substantially detrimental, no different than other structures that may be visible or the moving vehicles along the highway, the noise, the sound that's associated with that. I think all of those elements are well mitigated when I'm back there on Eugene Boulevard.
Now, it was mentioned before about when you come up to the side of the sign, you see black. What is the field of vision? What is the actual angle where the light, I guess, dissipates? Would that be a question for you?
Or Mr. Or Jeff, I don't know if you want to address that.
Depends, to answer that question, it depends.
Because what I'm bringing up is that
On
if I could, on Eugene, if I can see poles, I'm sure I'll see the side of the sign, or if I'm, I don't know if this is more south on Eugene, I may see light. So I'm just curious on what the field of view is for that.
Sure, a couple things in response to that. I was up and down Eugene in the car and walked it a number of times. There are certain areas, not necessarily behind the sign, but further north and south, where there are breaks that you can see through between the homes, but that's way past any impact from this sign structure. When you look at the area behind the sign coming back, going directly to the east, is where there's a really thick vegetative layer there, and there's some evergreens there. Further to the north and further south, there are some openings that you'll see, but not directly behind where the sign is. And remember, the building is behind the sign. It's going to block most of the pole. I don't believe that from a visual standpoint, from a lighting standpoint, there's going to be any impact to any of the homes along Eugene Avenue from the rear of this sign. You're not going to see the copy on either of these faces of the sign, whether it's digital or static.
But could you tell me what the field of view is
Well,
for that?
the field of view would be difficult to me to tell you exactly. I mean, if you were to take for the digital face, you could take, here, I could do it this way. We can go to this face. I would believe that the digital view would be something like that along the digital face. I'm sorry, the digital face is up here.
Mr. Gerber, for the record,
Oh,
you're referring
to A2, I'm referring to the bottom exhibit A2. It'd be kind of on an angle like that, nowhere close to Eugene Boulevard. And then this is the static face. It would probably be on an angle. It might be a little bit because it's not that focused. But again, you'd have to really. You're not going to see something like this. It's not the kind of, because the angle of this face is going to be more like that kind of an angle. That's the best way for me to explain it to you. You're just not going to have something like this. If this face was turned, but it's not. It's oriented towards Route 9.
So if I was standing on the side of that DCH building, I would see the sign. That's that big building right below.
Here?
Nope, other side, south.
Here.
Yeah, that's it. So if I'm
If-
standing on the side of that, I would see it.
If you were standing in the parking lot, you would be if you were standing in here, you would see. If you were over, you can't be here because the building's here, but if you were here, it'd be very difficult to see that digital face. If you drive by on a roadway, once you get close to it on an angle, it just goes black. It's amazing how quickly it happens. And then there's no glow to it at all. I don't know how else to describe it to you. And that visual depends. Listen, there's a lot of variables. What angle you're at when you're looking at it, the height of it, topography. But just all things being kind of equal and speaking in an average way. Yeah, I would say your visibility in that digital face would be like that.
Okay, I'm just.
That's about the best.
My concern is the Google Maps have it's probably in the summertime, so there's leaves on the trees. But I'm just concerned if I can see poles on Eugene where there's leaves on the trees in the wintertime, I may have a really great view of it. And I'm just curious.
I can tell you we were out here a couple weeks ago, we had our pole up in the air at the height of to the top of the sign with the flag. And we walked up and down Eugene and we couldn't find the flag.
But you said your pole wasn't at 50 feet.
No. We put up to the top for the visibility, not to determine the height, for the highway, to determine any impacts to the back here. We put the pole up to 50 feet, and we walked up and down here, and we could not find that flag. Now, granted, it's summertime. I grant you, and the leaves are in full bloom. But there's also evergreens there too. And again, we're talking about the back of the sign. We're not talking about the advertising faces. If this sign was turned around the other direction, we'd have a much different conversation. I don't recall walking up and down here, and this was 2 weeks ago, seeing any telephone poles. I did see there were some breaks, but I wasn't looking for telephone poles. I was looking for our flag. I did recall there being some breaks in some of the vegetation and here, but right behind here was probably where it was the thickest, which is right behind the sign. this was one thing I wanted to add, and it went back to the question regarding the sign height. And that is, where's the exhibit? Yeah, here it is. I went to look back at that exhibit with the telephone pole on it.
Just for the record.
This would be, I guess it's page one. This is page, I'll get the right number.
Page 5.
I think it's 5. That was one that was asked by the chairman, yes. If you take a scale and if you measure the sign face and the apron, you get about a ½ inch. And if you measure the top of the sign to the base of the pole, you get about 1.5 inches, which would be the 51 feet or 50 feet height we're talking about. In other words, this was done to scale. We tried to make this as close as possible. I believe that this, because of the angle of this photograph and because of topography, I'm also told by my engineer, I don't know this personally, that the two telephone poles, the one that's in front of the sign and then the one further to the south, are identical in height on the road. Yet in this picture, the one that's closer to us looks much higher than the other pole. So I just think that the photograph doesn't show some things as accurate, but I believe that's the height that sign is going to be. That's pretty much how it's going to look if you're riding down Route 9. I just wanted to add that.
Thank you, Mr. Gerber. John, did you want to add any additional comments or questions, particularly with regard to Mr. Leon Cavello's memorandum?
I did not want to leave John's memo out of the equation here. We did look at it. I think I answered particularly the section number 8 comments. There were 6 of them related to the goals of the master plan. I talked about that. The operational information pertaining to the change in cycles, the maintenance, I think that's been addressed. Security measures, I think we talked about that in terms of hacking. Somebody had a good question about that in the central command. There was also a question about fire prevention. I guess that's subject to electrical code. This is going to meet or exceed all electrical code standards. Also with respect to security, vandalism, there is no means of climbing up on this sign and it becoming attractive nuisance. It's something that only the operators or the maintenance people can get up there. Testimony as to the current status of the LCD technology. This is state-of-the-art technology, obviously, like a flat screen TV. It's crystal clear. It's a crisper image than the older technology. The status of the NJDOT permits, we have procured them. They have established that this is an appropriate location. They have separation standards, which we comply with. They have safety standards, which we comply with as well. And then finally, well, last question talks about safety, which I think I just answered.
Thank you, Mr. McDonough. Mr. Chairman, do you have any questions or any of the board members?
I have a comment. You mentioned all the positives. There are some negatives. And one of the negatives that bothers me is that you're looking for 6 variances, not 1 or 2, but 6. And you're not even close to what our ordinances ask for. And that is a concern of myself. So there are some negatives here in addition to the site possibly on Eugene Boulevard and the other areas in regards to the houses. But the 6 variances that you're asking for is quite substantial, and that is a concern.
And I know, Mr. Chairman, you said it's a comment, but if I may take it as a question to respond to that from a planning standpoint, your ordinance does have 13 conditional use standards that pertain to billboard. The applicant does not comply with 6 of those 13. So it does comply with 7 of the 13 requirements, including, importantly, the height requirement. Again, I ran through them. I won't run through them again, but it's related to the frontage of the property, the separation requirements, which we've addressed, and also the setback requirements, which I think are relatively minor in this application.
I understand you make a good point, but there still are 6 left out of 13. So.
Totally understood. And again, I think we know the test is supposed to be a balancing, weighing those positives. There certainly could be an impact. Any land development has impact, but it's a question of how substantial those detriments are, and do they outweigh those benefits that are associated with this technology, with this land use.
Uh, Mr.
Mr. Chairman,
McDonough,
I have a question
oh,
for the planner.
I'm sorry.
It's regard to buffering, which is relying a lot on the trees and the buffering, but a lot of it is not on your property. Can you tell me how many of these trees are actually on your property?
Well, what I tried to do was square off the property to show you what the extent or the approximate outbound of the property is. And it does extend back to those residential areas. The wooded portion is substantially, as you can see, substantially on the subject property. The building is about halfway back in the property. So there's another half of the property that extends back. So there are trees on the subject property that obviously would remain or be preserved as part of this application. And I did offer, I think I can stipulate on behalf of my applicant that we will supplement, or the applicant will supplement, perhaps with smaller evergreens so that someday you get that solid buffering or again, mitigating buffering to augment any gaps. Obviously, we can't control the buffers on the other properties, but they're there. I think they were all planned as part of the original development of Eugene Boulevard. We are right at the edge of a residential and a business zone. There's always friction when we're dealing with that, and the best way to deal with that is with good, solid buffering, and that's what's been put there. Again, that's why I say whoever planned Eugene Boulevard and its relationship to Route 9 did a really good job, because they've left a nice soft green edge between the two.
Mr. McDonough, what kind of buffering are we talking about? We're talking about a pole that's, a billboard that's going to be 50 feet high. We're not planting 50-foot evergreen trees.
No,
we know
we're
that.
not. We're
Okay.
not. But the trees that are there now are 60 feet high. They're 60 feet tall.
But those are deciduous trees.
There's a mix, and I think they show up. I have better pictures in the larger one that I
I
submitted.
guess where I was going is I'd like to see where the trees are located, to see if they actually are on your property, where you can control them, or if they're on someone else's property, you have no control over them. And I don't know if that's a proper buffer in this case.
Right. Obviously, we don't control the buffer, but I would think that those buffers are there to protect the residents against the commercial use that those structures or those plants are located on. And you can see in frames 7 and 8, these are frames of both flanking properties. If I look to the north of the subject property, and if I look to the south, those are Christmas trees. Those are evergreen trees that you can see. They're year-round green. It is the foliage that is immediately behind the property that is not evergreen, but that's where we're looking at the exact back of the sign. So to the extent someone to the north or to the south had a better view of, let's say, the face of the sign, which we've heard testimony that they won't, that's where those evergreens are. That's where those solid year-round green masses are that blocks the view of the face. So not only do I like the context of the buffer, but the composition of the buffer as well, I think is very good.
Actually, just a comment, in number 7 on page 3, to the extreme left above the roof, you can actually see a telephone pole with a transistor on it, a transformer on it. Pretty sure that's what that is.
Yes, that's on Eugene Boulevard. That is actually on Eugene Boulevard.
That's looking, okay, that's looking the other way.
Yeah, if
Okay.
I'm standing on the property looking to the north, that telephone pole sticks up from Eugene Boulevard.
Yeah, but that goes both ways. So if you're on Eugene Boulevard, you're going to be able to see the other way.
But look at the context of that pole in the context of the overall mass. And there's a frame there. This is not, I'm not trying to be extreme, but this is not a desert here where this pole would be sticking up by itself. There's other saturation here. We call it visual saturation. There are other elements in the landscape that would mitigate the impact, the visual impact of that sign. So if one did see it, it gets lost in the horizon, if you will, of other structures that are there.
Any other questions from the board?
I have a couple of questions, Mr. Chairman. Is there any chance you could lower the sign at all?
Well, Again, that's a balancing, and there's a number of factors at play here. I'll start first with our operator's testimony that they cite these things very carefully in the real world in terms of what provides for the maximum readability along the highway and what best serves the motoring public, the people that would actually be viewing this. So I'll fall back on the operational testimony that that's the optimum height. If the sign were to come down, that may be in the driver's line of sight for longer. Again, it comes lower. It may have more impact on the subject property, on the surrounding properties. It's a balancing. It's certainly a balancing. If it came lower, it could have a lesser impact on Eugene Boulevard. But again, in terms of where we are located now, I don't think the impact is substantial on Eugene Boulevard.
Do you own the property, or is you got to lease it from the doctor? Who owns the property?
I'll defer to Interstate, but I'm almost certain that they don't have control over the property. This is a lease on the property.
That's my understanding, yes.
I guess maybe this is for the COO. Was it Mr. Graber? Is his
Mr. Grover,
name?
yeah.
The question would be, how many billboards are too many billboards along Route 9? Do you know how many billboards we have along Route 9 there now?
I don't know the total number, but in terms of, from our perspective, this sign works along Route 9, makes sense along there, is appropriate for the market, is also appropriate from a visual perspective. I don't think it looks like there are a bunch of signs in a row there. You know, there are the sign right across the street, but it's almost parallel to it, and then there is, I believe, a sign further to the south. But it's not like there's a lot of signs there. I don't know, it looks, to me, from my perspective, it seems to be an appropriate number with the inclusion of this sign.
Because I know there's the building to the south of it, there's a billboard, I guess, on that property too.
Yes, on the
is
same
across
side.
the street, right.
Correct.
Right. And I know there's one right down the street over here. I know we have another digital sign right down by the water, water tank, and that gives us a lot of benefits by, you know, Amber Alerts and things like that you talk about. And there's other signs along there too, where the old Peter Pank was. So I know there's a number of signs along there, and you know, at some point, we put ordinances together to make sure that you don't look like the New Jersey Turnpike. You got these signs all along the way there. I know you advertisement, and you have the right of free speech, but at some time you got a billboard across the street from you, got a billboard right next to you, got a billboard right down the street. At some time, you just have too many signs. So I just wanted to, get your feeling on how many signs are too many.
And if I could just piggyback on that, I know you didn't ask me the question, you asked him, but the quick answer from the planning standpoint, it's very important here that we do have that outdoor advertising permit from the state. The state, as the stewards of the roadway, who have spatial standards that justify or weigh whether there are too many signs along the corridor, this application meets. I know your standards are a little tighter, but again, looking at the regulatory agency that has control over that state highway, they've said it's okay.
Mr. McDonough, every municipality's standards are tighter. We know that the requirement for the state is about 300 feet, right?
Yes, and for
Okay.
digital, it gets up to 1,000 or even further.
Right.
3,000.
3,000 feet.
Okay. All right, but to talk about I understand you got the permit, and they look at it from a safety standpoint, all right? Certainly, it's on the state highway. We want to make sure that, obviously, there's no impact on the state highway. But I think the concern of the board is not so much on the state highway, it's on the adjacent residential neighborhood which abuts this property. Okay.
Chairman, just a quick, over here. Have you seen the permit, John? Do you know what it looks like in terms of what it says?
I haven't seen it either.
I haven't seen it either.
We have a copy of it.
Yeah, I think it's actually for 1,000 square feet, if I remember
It's
right.
1,000 square feet per
672.
side, but that's not what it's going to be built at.
Yeah, right. This is proposed again as a 672 square foot sign, 14 by 48. The approval is for 20 by 50 or 1,000
Well,
square
then
feet.
you'd have another condition you wouldn't be satisfying if it was 1,000, so.
Understood.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, we have permits for both applications are here. Raritan. Let's make sure. copies we can hand out of the permits.
Why don't we just make it an exhibit? If you have an extra copy, we'll just mark it as A5.
Okay. We also have a copy of the actual approval letter from the DOT and then the listing of the permit. We can make that both. as
Okay.
an
That's fine.
exhibit.
Why don't you just initial that?
Okay.
I would just, oh, hang on. Actually, I'm going to just hand that to
Okay.
John.
Counselor, is your testimony complete?
I just wanted to ask Mr. McDonough one question. Mr. McDonough, in looking at the variances that we're seeking, I know the chairman raised concern regarding the number of variances, but if I look at the variances, and I'm describing or the issue relating to the impact to the residential, because obviously there are setback variances that are sought, but how many deal with that particular issue on the potential for impact to the residential area?
How many variances do we need with respect to the residential area?
Right.
One.
Right, correct. So I think, Mr. Chairman, I think that's the point here. I'm not in any way disagreeing with you in terms of the number of variances, I think, but the intent of the ordinance, as I read it, is to ensure that you don't negatively impact the residential areas that abut the highway. So I just wanted to sort of make that point. Mr. Chairman, to your question, we don't have any further direct testimony at this point. If you would like to have any questions of our professionals or members of or someone from the applicant, be happy to have those questions answered.
Just to follow up, so the one that affects the residents, can you just go over that one quickly?
I certainly can. I don't know what happened to my pen, but pointing, reminding the board, the requirement is 300 feet from a residential property. The separation between the proposed billboard and the nearest home is 109 feet.
Right.
Now, if you look at the whole corridor, particularly along the
90%.
portion or this stretch of Route 9 where the subject billboard is, there are no lots that are 300 feet deep at that location. So it's impossible.
But it's a substantial, it's not like you need 300 and you're at 250. You're at 109.
From a pure
You're not even halfway.
From a pure mathematical standpoint, the answer is yes. But bear in mind, an applicant could put a billboard 300 feet away and have no buffer in between. I'm looking at this as a balancing here, and the example I used was that the lack of horizontal buffer is mitigated by that vertical buffer. So we could have 300 feet but no trees in between, and that would be okay under the ordinance. It's a balancing. I know it's somewhat of a quantitative analysis, but really it's qualitative analysis, and I think the quality here, again, weighing the positive and the negative, falls on the positive side.
Okay. Any other questions? All right, what I want to do is I'm going to take a 5-minute recess, and when we come back in 5 minutes, I'm going to open it up to the public. Anyone from the public who wishes to speak on this application concerning the billboard and Route 9. Okay? So when we come back, I'm going to open it to the general public. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
The next meeting is August 23rd? Okay. And how many, what do we have? We have 5 bulk variances?
4 bulks, 1 use.
One use. Who's the use?
Fisher,
Fisher.
the diner.
What's that?
Diner.
Okay, all right, so what I think I want to do is I want to have the temple come back on August 23rd. They're going to go first. Let the 4 bulk variances wait. Give them at least an hour and a half, 2 hours, all right? Deal with all the bulk variances, and you'll have to do another night. Hey, Jeff? Jeffrey?
We're gonna have a foot.
I'm sure.
You can't mortgage Sort of true. Sort of true. Maybe, you know, you hear these things, talking to people you don't know these too. Yeah. Yeah. Sure.
First, third, and fourth are planning board.
Third picture?
Right, so one thing is the room, the other thing is the people, and I figure, start with the room and then go to the day, usually the same day of the week works for people, because they're scheduled.
Real long. But I don't, you can't.
Yeah, but that still kicks me back a month, because I would have finished on the 23rd. Because I would have had these two guys.
It looks. First one. You know, the way the boards are angled. You'll see pretty good. When it's been warm, look at these. Gonna be like floodlights.
It's amazing technology. You can't see it on the angle. It just blacks out. There's a lot of stuff.
I got a pair of goggles for my birthday, Father's Day. So I can actually try and do laps.
Yeah, yeah, but it's digital.
Oh, it's not. I don't know. I didn't think that.
The residential part of it is critical.
Going to next year. If there would be.
I just had one question.
Yeah.
This is actually my aunt's house on 11 UT Boulevard. I've been living here 3 years, but I'm actually in the process of buying it like 3 weeks away. But I've been living there for like 3 years, so I mean.
How close to the property line? How close? 11 as opposed to 11 Eugene. It's like right there.
It's close, yeah. I mean, it's right to my left, and where the trees are that he's talking about. Yeah, there's some pine trees, but there's also a lot of trees that will lose their leaves, and of course, they're going to see them when they're weighted. So I know what my aunt tells me when the taxes are going to be. You know, it's like 10 grand I'll be paying here a year.
Yeah, I guess, you know, when I talked about the balancing, you know, it's a highway.
Right.
It's commercial and residential on the other side.
Right,
and the only thing that's between them is trees.
Yeah, so I was just wondering if I mean, I guess I could speak on saying that I'm going to be the owner. You know, I just didn't want to screw things up when I.
No, that's fine.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
It's 9:15, you didn't hear public yet. He's not going to come on traffic. I like to have a special on the 9th,
Well,
finish and then finish on the 20th.
the special is strictly up to the prerogative of the
Okay,
board.
would you ask the board for that?
I will find out if the board wants to do a special meeting.
Well, that was the point
I
that was.
had the architect here and asked.
I'm giving you an opportunity, but I am gonna tell you that I'm giving you an opportunity to start, why don't you talk to your client? Okay.
Maybe that doesn't work.
Larry, I appreciate the offer, but I can't guarantee it's prefab traffic houses. I had my architect, well, as the hour was getting late, there's no way I was getting two on, so I didn't have to. And then my traffic, you know, he's gonna get through this thing, he's not gonna finish it. I'm not bringing him. Special meetings, with the big guy, and then, do that, and then continue trying to.
We don't have a person checking. We can't afford that. Hiring, we're putting security guards now in the building. 60 degrees.
That's right.
People hiring.
All this out. Okay, I have no issue.
All right, I'll show you something. I did that. And I kind of agree with them.
You available August 9th for a special meeting on the temple? You're around?
Larry, I'm gonna send you.
Yeah, we never had to do this. This is new, huh? We never we never I don't have to. We never saw it. None of us did. Is this your only copy? Yeah, we never had this one. So we want to see about the documentation.
You have six. He doesn't want to vote because you only have six. So he needs five.
We started with one, right?
You available? It's my anniversary. I can Wednesday instead.
Kenny, you around August 9th?
Yeah, I guess I could be.
Could be.
Yeah.
All right, so one.
Jay, did they do planning board?
It's getting like the planning board. Two meetings a month.
One meeting in August, right?
Nothing to do.
Yeah. Oh, 11 was, yeah. Sometimes I go behind that. Yeah.
Questions about this? Yeah, I'm gonna go.
Just your name, your wife going with you? Okay, put her name, and I'll get you both badges. You're checking in the 14th and checking out the 16th.
Ron, let's split it.
That's it.
Bob, before you,
Are you going?
before we go to the public, so.
I needed to know. Yeah. 'Cause
Okay, let's
rooms
call
are
the meeting
limited.
back to order.
It's limited availability.
We're going to call the meeting back to order. We do have an announcement that we want to make before we proceed.
Mr. Chairman, during the break, I spoke to counsel for Shri Bhaktanidhi, application 16-13, which is actually a carryover application from last month. And it appears that, obviously, because of the late hour and because there's still obviously public portion on the pending application, that it's likely that we would not be able to fully reach that applicant this evening. There may be some time, but certainly, in fairness to the applicant, he's got a witness here tonight who probably will take several hours, and obviously we know the protocol of this board is generally not to take any testimony after 10:30. So the applicant has requested that the municipality zoning board schedule a special meeting for August 9th, which would be a Wednesday. It's not a normal meeting night, but apparently the room is available that evening. So, pardon me? I'll do it at 7:30, that's fine, yeah. All right, but in any event, so the request of the applicant was to have that special meeting on August 9th. That would be Wednesday, August 9th at 7:30. And I've polled I've polled everybody on the board. It appears that at least 5 out of the 6 who are here this evening are available. We understand that there are 2 members who aren't even here this evening, so hopefully they'll be able to attend. So if you were here on that application for Shri Bhaktanidhi, application 16-13, that will not be heard this evening. You will not receive any further notice. This is your notice that the meeting that application will be heard at a special meeting of the Zoning Board of Adjustment on Wednesday, August 9th at 7:30. And Mr. Kantowitz, have I represented accurately that scenario?
Yes, Counsel. Jeffrey Kantowitz on behalf of the applicant, Bhaktanidhi, and we appreciate the board's consideration. We'll see you back here on Wednesday night, August 9th at 7:30.
And there will be nothing else?
No further public notice.
No further notice. There will be nothing else scheduled that evening but the applicant. Okay, thank you. Okay. 7:30.
That's August the 9th at 7:30.
We need to vote for that?
No.
Excuse me, Counsel. The board, however, will take care of noticing the meeting as a public meeting. I
Yes,
understand.
yes.
Thank you.
Our secretary has assented to that, so yes.
I'm going to take a roll call vote.
Mr. Green?
Here.
Mr. Kaczynski?
Here.
Mr. Kreismer?
Here.
Mr. Henry?
Here.
Mr. Emma?
Here.
Mr. Esposito?
Here.
Okay, we're back in session. I'm going to open the meeting up to the public. Anyone from the public wish to speak on this application concerning the billboard on Route 9? Come on up.
Ma'am, please, there should be a microphone somewhere. All right. And
Hello.
Let me, please raise your right hand, I'll swear you in. Swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
All right, please state your name, spelling your address. Spelling your I'm sorry. Please state your name, spelling your last name and address for the record.
Kathy Halmo, Halmo,
Okay,
3 Woodlawn Avenue, Parlin.
thank you.
I just have a question. I agree with Mr. Henry. I think we have enough billboards around. But my main question is Cerevel going to get any kind of money from these from this billboard? Like, do we get anything from?
Yeah, I can answer that question, Ms. Hamel.
That's all I have.
Okay, yeah, what happens is anytime there's a development project in the borough, obviously it increases the assessed value of that property. So the property taxes would go up for that piece of property based upon the fact that there's a billboard on that property. I don't know what the actual number is as to what the additional revenue would be, but certainly there would be additional tax revenue. Yes.
Can I also add something? Is that billboards are taxed as real estate in addition, so it would also be.
So, in other words, if a company rents this billboard for $100, let's say,
Okay.
Sayreville doesn't get a piece of that.
No. No. Sayreville does not get the revenue that
Sayreville's getting nothing.
No, I didn't say that. Sayreville gets additional property tax dollars as a result of having this improvement on the property.
So
It would be just like
Sayreville-
if you built an addition to your house, your taxes would go up. This particular property owner would pay more taxes now.
So they're going to have to pay Sayreville taxes.
Correct.
Okay.
Not the, but, well, yes. There'll be additional tax dollars coming to Sayreville as a result of this.
Okay.
Welcome. Anyone else from the public wish to speak on this application?
Sir, please raise your right hand. I'll swear you in. Swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
All right, please state your name, spelling your last name and address for
My
the
name
record.
is Richard, last name is Starek, S-T-A-R-E-K, and I'm here actually on behalf of my aunt, Angie Klimek. She's my aunt. Currently, I've been living at the house for 3 years, and I'm
What's the address, sir?
11 Eugene Boulevard, and I'm about 3 weeks away from buying a house. So like I said, I've lived there for 3 years, and I know exactly where they're putting the sign. There is some evergreen trees there, but there is a lot of trees that aren't evergreen trees. So when the leaves do drop, there's a good chance that you're going to see it. I know they talked about walking Eugene Boulevard, but I'm sure they didn't take trips down into people's backyards where I'm sure they would see that pole that they stuck up out there on Route 9. So, I mean, it is a concern of mine, and especially seeing, glaring lights, at night in the winter. It's pay a lot of tax on that street, so I'd really appreciate it, not seeing it. And if they could move it down, plenty of room down Route 9 somewhere else other than a residential neighborhood.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public wish to speak on this application? Is there anyone else wish to speak on this application? If there is no one else, make a motion that
Motion
the
close
closed
public portion.
public portion. Public portion is closed. Counselor, you want to sum up?
Mr. Chairman, I was talking to your counselor, Mr. Sachs, and I think at this point we would like to ask for a continuance for several reasons. One, you don't have your full complement of your board of 7 members. 2, we'd like to take under advisement some of the comments and questions that were raised and have an opportunity to perhaps meet with your professionals as well. And we also would like to carry the second application because some of the issues are pretty similar in nature, so I think we'd like to revisit that as well. And we'd like to ask the matter be carried and come back at an appropriate time when both applications can be recalendared. If that's within the board's acceptance.
September, right? Yeah.
I have one in September.
All right, Mr. Himmelman, obviously, we're busy right now, as you
I
can see.
understand.
So I don't think the August meeting, I think, is pretty booked, and plus, I'm not sure the carryover from the Sri Bhaktinidhi application may bleed over until the August 23rd meeting, but it's probably going to be September, so.
That's fine.
All right, so.
That would be without further notice?
Without further notice for either application.
Okay, thank you.
And I don't know what the mandatory date is, but I'm assuming you'll extend that till.
We'll consent to an extension.
An extension till the end of October, just to play it safe.
Correct.
Okay. All right, so Mr. Chairman, let me just announce if there's any, well, there aren't Don't appear to be too many people here. They've spoken, but if anyone is here on the application 17-13, which is the application which was just heard, that will be on for September 27th at 7:30 p.m. And application 17-15 will also be heard on September 27th at 7:30 p.m. Without further notice. This is your notice.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, members of the board. Thank you.
Yeah, we have some resolutions. Yeah, let me give you the resolutions.
All you have to do is minutes. All right. Approve the minutes.
10 resolutions. I have 5 of them. Yeah, I got quite a few. So.
You have 5?
Since you wanted like 4 o'clock. The crumb one.
We have 5 resolutions for the board. First 4 applications for the board. First one is application 17-07, which is 9 Crum Street.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the resolution be approved as written.
Second.
Roll call.
Mr. Green?
Yes.
Mr. Kaczynski?
Yes.
Mr. Kreismer?
Yes.
Mr. Henry?
Yes.
Mr. Emma was here.
Mr. Emma?
Yes.
Mr. Esposito. Mr. Esposito, I
It
think
was a
voted
no.
no, right?
Yes, I did.
Okay, fine. Yep. Okay.
Next one. The next application is 17-16, and that was 158 Washington Road. I cannot pronounce this man's name, but it's the shed,
Barat Trevetti.
the shed that we had on Washington Road.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the resolution be approved as written.
Second.
Roll call.
Mr. Green?
Yes.
Mr. Kaczynski?
Yes.
Mr. Kreismer?
Yes.
Mr. Henry?
Yes.
Mr. Emma?
Yes.
Mr. Esposito?
Yes.
The third one is application 17-14, and it's Matt Osuch, which was 11 Lagoda Street in Parlin.
Mr. Chairman, move that the resolution be approved as written.
Second.
Roll call.
Mr. Green?
Yes.
Mr. Kaczynski?
Yes.
Mr. Kreismer?
Yes.
Mr. Henry?
Yes.
Mr. Emma?
Yes.
Mr. Esposito?
Yes.
The last one is application 17-08, T-Mobile Northeast LLC. What is your pleasure on this application?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the resolution be approved as written.
Second.
Roll call.
Mr. Green?
Yes.
Mr. Kaczynski?
Yes.
Mr. Kreismer?
Yes.
Mr. Henry?
Yes.
Mr. Emma?
Yes.
Mr. Esposito?
Yes.
Okay, that completes the resolutions. The next order of business is the minutes of June 28, 2017. What's the board's pleasure on the minutes?
I make a motion the minutes be approved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Minutes approved. We're done. Motion to adjourn.
Larry, any litigation, any
No. No, I think we're,
case man, don't we have case?
you know,
yeah,
actually,
there's
Mr. Chairman, yeah,
Starbucks.
the Wawa
Wawa.
litigation. There is a case management conference scheduled for August 14th, but I'm advised by counsel for both parties that I believe they have resolved their issues, but there'll be a it'll be remanded back to this board because there's going to be a flip of where the convenience store is and where the gas station is located. So it still requires board approval, but that appears to be what they're proposing now.
You said
So-
you're gonna flip where the pumps are to
Yeah.
where the building is gonna be?
Yes, as a concession to the apartment complex. I guess they feel it can work now. We'll see. They have to obviously come before this board. and-
Further away? Yes.
Well, the gas, it will now be north, and the convenience store will be south, so.
It's further away.
The gas is further away. Yeah, we'll see how it works.
That was an easy one. Wow.
We'll see.
So when they do that, then it will be resolved and we can.
Well, it's gonna come back before this board, because it requires,
We don't agree.
it's gonna be, there's gotta be, right, yeah, they're gonna have to re-engineer it, so.
Whole new application, Larry?
It'll be a new, well, I'm not sure. That I'll
It's
discuss with the
remanded.
judge.
It's
He may
remanded,
remand
right?
it back with the condition that a new site plan be submitted for consideration by the board. That's probably what it'll be.
And it would be a new application.
It'll be a new application. Well, it'll be a new application.
So the way things are going, we're gonna be busy for a while.
We're busy, yeah.
Okay, I make a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Meeting adjourned.
Submitted an application for an appeal
Who was
of a
that?
decision.
I talked to him.
The senior, senior daycare. So there is an appeal, do we have time for that for next month, for the August meeting?
Yeah, I think we can, yeah.
For an appeal,
Well, here's my feeling. If we're gonna do the temple on the 9th, they're not coming back on the 23rd. If we don't get through it, they'll come back in September, that's all. So,
Let me just turn
So you wanna put that on the calendar for,
yeah, Joan would know what's for August.
What is that, what was that?
Anything else?
That's the Briarwood, where they built a new, they took down, they
we'll figure out the schedule.
demolished the,
You're going to the planning board.
what?
You're before the planning board.
Yeah, they are before the planning board, is it? Yes.
hey Andy, that's the planning board.
No, the planning board, what they want to do is, in brief, that got approved to be a nursing home, as we know it, for for elderly care. Planning board, if you remember on Ernston Road.
Right, they're on the agenda for next week for expanding the parking lot, get an amended planning board approval. They submitted a revised plan, they're expanding the parking lot, they're getting rid of the canopy, they're expanding the parking lot to have like an extra 90 spaces. This is for the, Briarwood.
That's where.
Briarwood. Okay, I'm not sure how, Emily didn't mention that. They don't wanna put, they have a tenant there